Hi, I'm Maddie,
And I'm Abigail, and this is
two writers.
Many Wrongs. Today, we are super excited because we have author Rachel Lynn Solomon with us. She is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author. Her books have been optioned for film and translated into more than 15 languages. And she is one of my personally favorite authors. So, Rachel, we are so happy to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you both so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to kind of jump right into this. And I want to start off in Past, Present, Future. I was lucky enough to get an ARC copy of it and, read it ahead of time, and I loved it. But in the book, your character Rowan is going to school for creative writing, and she has a writing teacher, Miranda, who really ends up kind of helping her a lot, both in her writing and in her personal life. And I was just wondering, did you have a writing mentor like that for, either in school or after school? Do you have somebody that you like has helped you along the way?
I've definitely been a teacher's pet for most of my life, but I don't know if I've had anyone who's occupied quite that exact role. And with that character, I really wanted to do kind of, I think, the opposite of what might be expected in a book where you're reading about the character struggling in a writing class in college for the first time. You might anticipate the professor sort of being a terrible person who like looks down on romance novels, and actually a couple people even messaged
Mhm.
me saying that they were relieved that that didn't
Mhm.
happen. So that was really nice to hear, because that was even my first instinct. I was like, oh, she's going to have a terrible professor. But
Hmm.
often when I'm writing, I find that my first instinct is usually something that's too obvious and just not an interesting choice. So I will try to do, maybe the opposite, or just see if I can dig a little deeper. Uh, and with Yeah, and with this professor, I did have some people early on in my other career. Um, I worked in radio for a long time, or I guess not a long time, but it felt it felt like a long time when you.
Sure, sure.
I was like, I said that totally on autopilot. I was like, I think it was probably 5 to 6 years.
An
That
eternity.
long.
That's
Yeah. I mean, when you're in your 20s, that feels
it.
super
Yes,
long.
definitely.
But when I was in college, there was a professor. She was like a visiting professor who had previously worked, or she still worked at NPR. And as someone who wanted to go into public radio, that was just a huge deal to me. So she definitely became, an idol for me. And also, she advised me on a couple of projects, and I really looked up to her. Um, in the writing sphere, I don't know if I've had that exact experience, because I my writing education, I guess, like all took place post college, and
Hmm.
really mostly revolved around just like reading as much as I could and
Mhm.
putting myself um in that world.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah, I know, or I read that your degree is in journalism, which I think is really interesting. Because the last author we interviewed also got their degree in journalism and then moved into the fiction realm. So that seems to be like a pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so common. I mean, probably because we all just want to write lies and make
Yeah.
things up, which you cannot often do in journalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's frowned
I
upon.
Yes, it is frowned upon. I really like this idea that you have this instinct of where you want to take your rating, and then you're like, yeah, but what if I didn't do that instead? I love that. That's like a little act of rebellion you have.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's rebellion so much as really worrying about a book feeling predictable. And when you write
Or
romance, a lot of it is going to be predictable to a certain
Mhm.
extent, because just the conventions of the genre guarantee certain things, like
Right.
the
Hmm.
happily ever after. Um, so, and my books are not like, they don't have twisty plots. They're not like an, oh my god, I can't believe that cliffhanger on at the end of
Hmm.
chapter 15. Like there's none of that. So it's really just trying to find the possibilities for surprise wherever you can.
That's
Yeah.
really
Well,
that's cool insight.
and I will tell you, reading these three, I was surprised at one point in every single one of them. So mission absolutely accomplished.
Oh, hooray, great.
Yeah. Um, Thinking about, I know that you are a plotter by nature.
Mhm.
How do you? kind of fit the idea of plotting out your novels and having those little acts of rebellion, trying to go against the grain, to go against those like cliches in some way.
My plotting process, I have my own beat sheet that I kind of adapted based on, Save the Cat, and also there's this one. I actually feel like I need to look around my office for it because I do not remember the name. Um, oh, I should. It's called "Romancing the Beat," which should have been obvious
Oh.
because it's a great title.
Yeah,
Um,
great title.
roman- Romancing the Beat. It's like this tiny, thin book, but it is so so helpful and for any romance writer. So I really have just sort of created my own little beat spreadsheet, and I know certain things that I want to hit. Like, I mean, I have one pulled up right now. So some of the moments that you're trying to land on are like one of my favorite things is the "he's not that bad" moment.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
um which can obviously be modified depending on the characters, but I mean, it's the traditional, right, like in a romantic comedy where the lead character realizes like, oh, this person that I despise actually has a shred of humanity, and
Mhm.
maybe I despise them slightly less.
That's so good.
I love that. I think 'cause when we interviewed Kristen Harmel, she also talked about having, like, an outline based on other books, and
Mhm.
this is kind of like an outline based on, like, the romance beats that you have. I really love that idea of having something that you can plan around, like a specific set of rules that you can follow. That I think having a set of rules really helps you map out and decide what you wanna do, but also helping you find places where you can maybe subvert those expectations and maybe break the rules a little bit while still being familiar to the readers.
Yeah, definitely. And I find I'm constantly going back to the outline in the revision process, even.
Mhm.
Like I'm about to jump into a revision right now, and I know that there's going to need to be some structural, re tetrising of the book. And I'm probably going to go back to that outline and make sure that the beats are hitting where they're supposed to, and that there aren't just giant, lengths of time where nothing is really happening and there isn't any tension.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, couldn't I'm interested because we talked about, soggy middles before. Can you talk about how this outline can help you when struggling through the slog that is the middle of the novel?
I honestly wish it would, because I think that, I don't know if for me it's the middle so much as it's the last third.
Sure.
I Yeah, because it's usually for me actually, I think the middle is the most exciting part, 'cause that's usually when the romance is really building up and you're getting to write all
Okay.
the fun scenes that you've been looking forward to. For me, like it's kind of getting to the climax, because usually right before the climax the relationship is going well and
Mhm.
you're poking tiny holes until you get to one big hole at the climax that they have to try to solve and fail at for a moment usually.
Uh-huh.
uh, but when the relationship is going well, that's kind of tricky. And then climax and everything after that are always really hard for me. I don't know why. The climax is usually hard because I think I often have a lot of voices in my head from, TikTok and Instagram of people
Mhm.
who are really anti third act breakup, and I'm very pro.
Mhm.
Because I think it's a really great opportunity to show how your characters have evolved from these people that they were at the beginning to
Mhm.
who could not be in this healthy relationship, and now kind of being confronted with the thing, um this like false belief that they had at the beginning that would have prevented them from being in this relationship, and then the third act breakup is really their last big hurdle to get over that and like achieve their ultimate character growth and be able to be in that relationship. Um, and that, I think, in theory is not difficult to write, but it's making it feel organic and not too
Mhm.
staged. And
Mhm.
then the denouement is really a challenge because you're sort of wrapping everything up, and your main character has to grapple with like, okay, how can I personally feel good? How can I
Mhm.
have things feel okay with my family? How are things feeling okay with my job? And now finally we get to the relationship, and you're just sort of, yeah, putting a bow on everything, and it's really hard not to make it feel rote, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, So that's something I struggle with every book,
Yeah.
writing them
I
all.
just looking at past, present, future, as somebody who had a, long distance relationship in college for my freshman year, because my husband's actually a year younger than I am, and we are also high school sweethearts. So my
Oh,
freshman year of college
amazing.
was his high school or senior year of high school. Um, so much of what you wrote in the book felt so true and so accurate to like that pain and that struggle that even though, the ending, yeah, everything is wrapped up in a pretty little bow. Your characters are already so grounded and so realistic that like it made my heart swell so much because again, like that's what you're hoping for in a romance. That's what you're looking for is that happy ending, all that kind of stuff. So I completely understand the struggle to make it not cliche or rote in some way, but your characters are so beautifully grounded that I can't even imagine your endings not being like very satisfying.
Oh, thank you. No, can you can you tell me what's wrong with my current book then?
I don't know, maybe send over an advanced copy. We'll see. But I
I
do wonder, go ahead, Maddie.
Well, I was just gonna say I do find it interesting because I think you brought up a good point about specifically writing a romance genre that maybe the climax and the denouement might be more difficult because that is kind of where it gets to be like that more cliche thing. And then I think it was really, really cool that you mentioned, not cool, but like real that you mentioned that you heard all these people on TikTok saying they don't like it, but you're like, but that's what
Mhm.
is natural and that's what I want to do. And sometimes you do have to press against those voices and do what you know is best for your story, and I wonder if that has more to do with your struggle, is that, like, you fear what might come out of it, but it sounds like I unfortunately have not had a chance to read your book yet, but it sounds like you got it, like, you're following your
Mhm.
instincts and you're doing the right thing by doing that.
Oh, well, thank you. And I mean, with Past, Present, Future, it was sort of a different beast because the characters start the book already together and they end the
Mhm.
book together. So you can't just have them be solidly together the whole book
Yeah.
because that's really boring. And that doesn't, I mean,
Mhm.
even if we would like to believe that they don't experience any hardship, it just, there needs to be some kind of conflict. Otherwise, why are we reading it? Why does the book exist?
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
absolutely. So when Maddie and I met in grad school getting our degrees in creative writing. And when I started grad school, I was writing YA stories. Um, and myself and two of my other friends all had an argument about who who gets the least amount of respect in like the literary world because I was writing YA, one of them was writing sci-fi, and the other one was writing romance, and like had an argument about how other people have like looked down on us for these genres because we're not writing these like great literary critiques and whatever kind of thing. Like, have you ever felt that struggle while writing this beautiful genre that you write?
Well, first of all, I'm curious who won the argument.
We did actually end up giving it to the romance writer because we had the argument that YA is still taught in schools with things like The Outsiders, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not writing The Outsiders. And then the sci-fi person we got rid of really quickly because we were like, that's a whole very well-selling genre. So our romance writer friend did actually win who gets the least amount of respect, but that was 6 years ago, and I feel like
I think it's
romance
different.
really, yeah, I really think it is. I think it's different now. That's working at the bookstore, we sell mostly romance books.
Yeah, I'm not shocked to hear that. And
Mhm.
what's really fascinating is, because I live in Amsterdam, and one of the reasons that my husband and I moved over here was to be able to do some traveling. And what is so fascinating is you go into any bookstore anywhere in the world, pretty much. And I mean, I have not been all over the world, but like anywhere I've traveled, the book talk tables are all exactly the same.
Mhm.
It is just it's kind of mind blowing. Um, yeah, and I think that even I was just signing some books around Amsterdam yesterday, and I had not been in a couple stores in a while, and they had rearranged two of the three stores that I went into had rearranged so that the romance sections were larger and more prominent because that's what a lot of people are looking for. So I
That's
really
awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think romance can win that argument anymore.
No.
I think YA is just, even though there are obviously a lot of big um YA books that have gotten a lot of
Mhm.
attention on TikTok, so many movie adaptations and all of that. Um, I don't know. I think there are always going to be people who look down on it as
Mhm.
being for children, or being less
Mhm.
mature, less advanced. I mean, just as an example, when I started writing adult romance, the question that I got asked the most was, "Are you going to stop writing YA now?" As though, like, now I've graduated and I don't
Wow.
need to do this, like, starter pack kind of kind
Mm.
of
Oh my
writing.
gosh.
Mm. I love YA. I feel like it's such a great critique of like the human existence because none of us know what we're doing in like our teenage early 20 years. So I always find YA to be really impactful.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's a huge reason why I'm drawn to it too. It's very cathartic, and I mean, the characters are really just still. I think it's very relatable that characters are still figuring
Mhm.
stuff out, and I think there's nothing quite like exploring first love, which you can really do in YA more so than adult romance.
Mhm.
Mhm. And
Definitely.
that's a very special kind of love too.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Maddie?
Mhm.
I
So
just feel like I'm doing all the talking and I know you have questions.
I really want to talk because you're talking a little bit about book talk, and I find book talk to be really interesting, especially because when book talk started to take off, I think it really enlivened the book sales and people being interested in books again. And book talk, when I go on book talk, I do happen to see like a lot of female voices and just seeing like the power of us women taking back our girlhood and being like, no, it's not silly to read books and read books about romance. And I think that's so cool that it's that's become so powerful that we're seeing it in everywhere you go in bookstores. There's always a book talk display, and it's always those really fun, wonderful romance books that are finally getting the praise they deserve and that
Mhm.
spotlight that they deserve. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love what you said about, yeah, like taking back girlhood, because definitely when I was growing up, it was not cool to like anything that was girly or feminine.
Mhm.
And to the point where yeah, I didn't read any like romance or YA in high school because I would have been terrified of someone. Maybe I might have said this at the event that we were at, Abigail,
Yeah.
but like I would have been so terrified of someone seeing me like reading something like that. And now I have
Mhm.
multiple books with bright pink covers. Um and but I think that it's honestly part of a wider trend too. And I mean, there's of course the whole like not like the other girls trope, and
Mhm.
also I feel like every YA character I read back then in books from that time were all about girls who like really were so against anything feminine. Like they didn't wear makeup,
Mhm.
they weren't interested in
Yes.
clothes. Like it was not cool to like any of
Mhm.
that. And now there's just been such a massive, yeah, reclamation of romance. Like I honestly really lump like Taylor Swift into that too. It's
Yes.
just such a, yeah, like celebrate, like unashamed
Mhm.
celebration of femininity, really, and like that is much more inclusive than it ever could have been back
Yes. Absolutely. It's I love like working at the bookstore because we get so many people coming in who have seen a book on Book Talk and they'll pick it up and read that one, but then they always come back and they're like, okay, what's next? And like, I feel like it's almost creating another, I don't want to say generation because I think that it's, all ages kind of thing, but just like a new age of reading. And romance really is at the forefront of that movement right now, which is just so exciting.
'Cause I
then.
think it's
Yeah, it's
showing
so
I'm
interesting.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's so interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's showing that, like, people have this very closed idea of what it means to be a reader,
Hmm.
and with this resurgence of showing, like, people are into romance and fantasy romance and, all that stuff that's coming forth on Book Talk is showing that there are books literally for everyone, and that you don't have to read a certain type of book to be a reader, and kind of showing that we can love reading no matter where we're coming from and what we like. There's something for everybody, and kind of bringing back inclusivity for the reading world is, I think, happening because of Book Talk, showing like those books you read in school aren't the only books. Look at this fun, happy, romantic book and
Right. Reading
letting
can be
us,
for fun, not just for
yeah,
learning.
exactly. I
Mhm.
love that.
I do want to ask, so I know that like a lot of times authors will come up together. And since I was lucky enough to meet Maddie when we were in school together. And so we kind of formed our little writing community through that. But since you don't have that kind of background, like, do you have a writing cohort or some kind of writing community that you are able to be a part of?
Yeah, I don't think it's as structured as sort of the yeah meeting someone in school and having a community around that. But I had some close friends in Seattle um, that whenever I go back, we all get together. I mean, I'm often doing events with them, and then I have some other friends that are kind of spread out that I've we've been trading and reading each other's work for a long time. But then I still also love like connecting with newer authors. Like often if I'm asked to blurb something and I really love it, then I feel really strongly about like trying to shout about it as much as possible. And like sometimes when you read a book that just you connect with so deeply, you want to make that person your friend.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, oh yeah.
so I think that I've been very lucky that sometimes like it's very cool. You can read a book that you love and
Hmm.
tell the person how much you loved it. Um, but there is, I will say it is harder now that I don't live in the U.S. Not to say that,
Hmm.
like there is a great book community here, but the author community is a little different because well, a lot of people are writing in Dutch, and
Yeah.
people who are writing in English aren't experiencing traditional publishing in the US. It's just a totally different game.
Hmm.
So not that we don't have things in common, but yeah, it's a little it's different.
Hmm.
And I think there's definitely like great conversations and connections to be had over those differences. And there's obviously, I mean, I could go into a whole thing about like the the difficulties that Dutch publishers are experiencing with younger readers preferring to read in English. There's
Hmm.
actually a whole New York Times piece about it recently.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, but yeah, it's like both a challenge, but it has also opened things up just in terms of understanding what foreign publishers are dealing with and what the community is like in other parts of the world. I'm
Hmm.
super grateful to have that experience.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I think you can learn a lot about yourself in different industries just by seeing the differences in other places. Like, I think that's one of the things that's really great about my relationship with Abigail is we have very different approaches to writing. We write very
Hmm.
different things, and we've learned a lot from each other because of that.
Yeah. No, we have a Discord channel with our writing group just because we are so scattered and everything. But even then, I can't imagine being overseas and like trying to find time to meet with the writing group and stuff like that. So that's incredibly challenging, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's so funny because I feel like you learn really fast, like which of your friends are early risers and which ones are night owls, and
Yeah.
when you can text them if you're having a crisis. But it's like it's not uncommon to like let's say I wake up to an email that came in last night for me, and then it's like 8 a.m. and I'm like, oh my god, I have something to deal with, and
Hmm.
they're not awake for 5 more hours at least.
No.
Oh, yeah, that's gotta be difficult with the time
Hmm.
difference. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, Maddie and I joke a lot because what, in addition to each working on our own novels right now, we also are sending out short stories and like trying to get some traction there. And the number of times that I've gotten a rejection letter and just immediately call her and like been able to talk to her about it, like that would be really difficult if she was just, okay, I have 6 hours, I have to hold on to this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, I guess maybe part of it's good because you send like the all caps shouty text, and then
Hmm.
6 hours later, you're like, actually, I think I'm fine, and they still haven't woken up.
You've already worked through all 5 stages of grief and you're
Yeah.
good. I saw that you have published some short stories before you published your novels. Did those have any, like, impact on your, writing career, on your ability to get an agent? Were you already agented at that time? Like, how did that help your writing career?
Oh, those were actually all after. So yeah, I didn't sell
Oh,
anything prior to my debut novel. Yeah. So and
cool.
I always I like to mention whenever that comes up that like I didn't have any connections. I sent a cold, it was a cold query, did not know my agent at the time. I have a different agent now, but
Mhm.
uh yeah, there was no personal connection involved
Wow.
in getting published. So it really I know I feel like it can sometimes so many creative industries can seem really full of connections and
Yeah.
nepotism, but
Mhm.
majority of people that I know did not have an in at all, and
That's very
you truly don't need one.
yeah,
It's
it's
truly
very
like
heartening
a
to hear.
Mhm.
yeah, and it's not a I think what's also important is that publishing really is not a pay to play
Mhm.
industry. I mean, of course, there is the amount of time invested and like the time that you're taking away from the rest of your life, responsibilities, and just like the privilege of having writing time. But in terms of submitting your book to agents and getting published, um, that is not something that you are. Your agent doesn't make any money until they sell your book. So
Mhm.
you're yeah.
Okay. How did you, like, find your agents? Like, how did you decide to query to those specific people or know that it was the right time for that professional relationship to take place?
Yeah, well, so I am on my third agent right now, and hopefully, hopefully this was the one that
Mhm.
we will have a long career together. But I
Yeah.
actually switched agents last year, so
Okay.
it's still, yeah, it's still like a newer relationship,
Mhm.
but it's been great. Um, yeah, I think at the time it was a lot of, I was very involved in the writing community on Twitter, using a lot of, query tracker, publishers, marketplace, and all of those sites. And now, I mean, I think like manuscript wish list is probably where I would direct most people. I think that one
Mhm.
is like pretty comprehensive.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I really just did a lot of research, looked at the books that they currently represented. Um, tried to see like if my book seemed like a good fit. And then when I was searching for a new agent this past summer or about a year ago, I really just based it on people I knew, not even necessarily close friends, because I think that sharing an agent with a close friend is not difficult, but like I just sort of eh, I talked to my friends and I just felt like
Mhm.
it made more sense to look at different agents at that agency or yeah, because it's like it can be complicated when like you are that close and maybe you're getting different things and like
I
or
imagine it'd
even
be like your parent picking a favorite child kind of thing.
almost, yeah. So it was really just based on yeah, like friendly acquaintances who
Yeah.
had super positive experiences. Like my current agent, multiple people told me they would die for her.
Oh my gosh.
Um and like honestly same at this point. So
That's
they were exactly right.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
So you mentioned Twitter, which I used to have a pretty big following on Twitter, and
Mhm.
I mean, pretty big for me was like 900 followers, but um, and was really involved in that writing community. But do you know
Mhm.
where they went after it became
Um,
X? Because I don't know.
that's such a good question. I know 'cause I feel very removed from it because I was also
Mhm.
super involved with Pitch Wars.
Yeah.
I did that for like 7 years maybe.
Wow.
And yeah, like very, very involved on Twitter. And I have not been on there. I mean, since before became
Mhm.
X. So like
Yeah,
at least 3 years.
yeah,
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people did go to Instagram, but it is hard because there isn't the same like water cooler
Mhm.
yeah.
element. I mean, I think a lot of writers like form groups and have like Slack channels or Discords.
Mhm.
Um, like I know, for my romance publisher, there's like a big Slack for people who are at that publisher.
So
Um,
cool.
yeah, I've not been on there in a couple of years because I just like I get really distracted easily, and if I'm I'm actually, so it's funny because like I talk about book talk, but I'm not on TikTok, so I only
Hmm.
just see stuff like once it makes it to Instagram.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
but I just always feel like if it's not actively like assisting with my writing or like
Hmm.
my something that I'm doing that day in terms of promotion, it's just it's a distraction, and I have plenty of other distractions.
Yeah, I
But
have to
I don't need another one.
Hmm.
I really feel that because I used to have a problem with both Instagram and TikTok. And so I had like timers on my phone so I could only spend like a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And then I ended up uninstalling them on my phone because I could not be trusted. And so I put them on my tablet, but that's like it's our family tablet, so it's like in the living room. So it just limit my exposure because I can't trust myself to have
Hmm.
access to those things because I get too
Hmm.
distracted. I need to be more close off from everything because I just don't trust myself.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I but yeah, I going back to your original question, I don't know where the communities really are. Do you guys know? Yeah, you might be more in it than I am.
I gotta tell you, we are like throwing stuff at the wall just trying to see what sticks at this point because like I said we have our writing community from grad school but we want to build a bigger writing community. Like that's the whole goal of this podcast is to help people who are in the same stage of writing that we are of like finishing a novel, starting query agents, like that kind of beginning part to grow a community there. So we have our podcast. We're on Instagram. We've tried to be on TikTok, but it wasn't great. I think that when Twitter kind of died, it took a huge community with it because it's not on. What's the Instagram version of Twitter
Threads.
now?
It's
Oh,
called
threads.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not on Threads. So we're also struggling a little bit. I've started an in-person writing group at the bookstore just to have like a smaller local
that's great.
community. But yeah, it's definitely difficult to find people in the same stage of writing, which I think also is why we
Yeah.
keep interviewing like established authors to be like, how do we get to where you are? Like how do we get the
Well,
bigger group?
I mean, I think that like I wish I knew, and that's because I feel like I used to be so plugged in,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
now when people are asking questions like that or asking questions, I mean, I think that yeah, like post publication, there are a lot more resources, but in terms of querying, I really think it's all so much of it is happening off social media or like in
Hmm.
Mhm.
smaller groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think the take partner matchups happening in like, smaller communities or um yeah, but it is different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, but that's kind of our hope with this podcast is to reach those people. Maddie, myself, and our other friend, the three of us are all finishing our novels at the same time, and we're all going to start querying together at the same time. So at least we'll have like a small cohort. But we all write different stuff. I'm writing contemporary fiction. Maddie is writing an amazing feminist space opera.
Oh, fun.
It'll be interesting.
Ama I don't
I
amazing? No.
Yes, amazing.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. So Rachel, you've been writing YA since like 2018, right? Somewhere in there. In romance and all that kind of stuff. How has that changed now being in 2024? Like growing up, some of my all-time favorite books were The Sisters of the Traveling Pants, and those were
oh,
like the
yeah, me
peak
too.
of like romance, friendship, like everything to me. And reading them now, I'm like, they still hold up, but there's one or two places where I'm like, ugh, it doesn't quite hold up enough. But like writing romance, how do you feel it's changed over the years?
Yeah, but it's a good question because I know I feel similarly when I go back to old favorites. I mean, I love
Hmm.
Meg Cabot was always my ultimate.
Hmm.
And I mean, Florida. I mean, well, I don't know if Florida native, but I know like she's in
Hmm.
Florida. Um, and yeah, I know they don't hold up. Like, I'm sure if I went back to my first two books, I would be appalled. Honestly, I already know there's stuff that I would not write now that
Hmm.
I wrote
Or
then. But I it's tricky because I think that the book is a product of its time and it is
Mhm.
sort of a time capsule, but you don't want to age it too, or you don't want to like
Mm.
make it too inaccessible to someone picking it up like 10 years later. I
Mhm.
mean, like, hopefully 10 years from now, these books are still, at least some of these books are still like accessible, like physically, like, people are
No,
able to get
absolutely.
their
Yeah.
hands on
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I remember when it wasn't even that long ago, maybe like 10 years ago, I picked up a
Mhm.
YA that wasn't even that old and it referenced TRL, like
Oh, wow.
Banana.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it just like really took me
Mhm.
out for a while.
Funny.
So
Oh
I
my
think that
gosh.
when you use stuff that's like really current
Mhm.
and just has not quite stood the test of time yet, and that's a hard
Mhm.
judgment to make, you really run the risk
Mhm.
Yeah.
of
That
alienation. And I
you
mean
know
that's
go ahead.
oh
Sorry.
sorry.
I was
Oh no,
just
I was
gonna
gonna
say
say in
that
a way like it's not
Rachel, go ahead, please.
please,
okay,
please,
sure.
please.
No, I was gonna say in a way like it's kind of endearing and it like it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily take away your enjoyment of the book. But like when I first started out, I was so opposed to even mentioning specific social media
Mhm.
sites. Like I would just say social media. I wouldn't say like Twitter or Instagram. And
Mhm.
now I'm actually very glad I didn't ever say Twitter. Or, I mean, I think I did in some books. No, I definitely did. I definitely did. But now, yeah, like I will say Instagram, but I really try not to rely too heavily on references or like
Mhm.
current slang because it's just I don't feel like you need it to
Yeah.
tell a good story.
Yeah. When I
Yeah.
was teaching, like English 101, I would use the book The Hate You Give, and so much of that plot relies on Tumblr, and I have to
Was it
explain to
really?
these now 18
I
like,
don't remember that part of it, but I'm sure if I reread it, I'd be like, wow, a
yeah,
lot of
it's
numbering.
crazy, like, a lot of the protests, like, all that kind of stuff gets started on Twitter or on, Tumblr, and
Oh
explaining
wow.
to these 18-year-old, like, college freshmen what Tumblr was
Gosh.
is always hilarious to me, but I do love, like, you do have some references in your book, like, I'm pretty sure, you mentioned Alice Hoffman's Rules of Magic, which is my favorite of her practical magic books, and, like, I love that you have references to things that speak to who the character are, but not necessarily date the book, you know what I mean? Like, I think
Right.
that's such a balancing act.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I could not have said it better myself, actually, because that is 100% what I'm trying to do is
Mhm,
Yeah.
find find things that have yeah, like to some extent stood that test of time. Like Rowan is a huge fan of the Smiths,
mhm,
um, which yeah are not a current band, and they have been around enough that like okay, people are probably still going to be listening to them in 10 years.
mhm,
Um, so yes, I really really try. Or when you can't do that, then making something up. Like Rowan has a favorite author, and like that obviously wasn't going to be a
right.
real yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love putting, like, little snippets here and there in my books for my characters, in the hope so I follow you and I follow Alice Hoffman on Instagram, and, like, seeing her repost about your book, I was like, "This makes me so happy," like, the idea that one of my favorite authors might do that someday if I, like, mention a little snippet or something is just it's such a cool, like, nod to other people in our writing community who have helped either shape us or inspired us in some way. Like, I love that idea.
No, it is really cool. Like, actually, I think my favorite thing is that I often use song lyrics in the epigraph of a book,
Mhm.
like the little quote at the beginning. And a couple times, the person who, like the musician, found it in some way. Like, someone must have told them, and they reached out
Oh,
to me, like
oh,
not in a negative way, just like, oh, you
yeah.
used my song. That's cool. So that was really neat. So it was like, oh, this like both kind of yeah creating very different forms of art but like
Mhm.
was a song that really meant something to me when I was writing the book, so that's
That's
really
awesome.
cool.
That'd be a dream.
That's really cool.
I mean, I should say they're not like huge. Like one of them was like Ireland's representative for Eurovision 2 years ago that didn't make it to the finals. So they're not like
But that's even cooler. Like, that's such a
household
small
names.
thing.
No, it is. It's like a very, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know, you know. I love that. I think that kind of even makes it more fun.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, I think maybe we have time for like 2 more questions. Maddie, do you have ones that you're burdened through? Because you know I have them.
I'll let you take it and I'll think about. You get one more
I know, I
and
know. Okay.
I'll think about what I want to ask next.
So just in general, like, what does your editing process look like once you kind of get a full draft together and then working with your agent, working with editors? Like, what does that all look like?
Yeah. At the beginning, I would say it's just sort of it's kind of like a competition with myself to see how fast I can create something that is book length because my
Mm-hmm.
first drafts are really, really messy, completely incoherent, would not make sense to anyone but me.
Uh-huh.
And no, no one reads those. But usually those take like ideally 4 to 6 weeks, and then I
Mm-hmm.
will go back in and polish and make it, suitable for other human eyes. That whole process is probably from like, seed of an well, I was gonna say seed of an idea, but usually the ideas
Mm-hmm.
are with me for longer. But from like when I first start working on it, like just that, devote my my life to that.
Yep.
Well, probably 3 months, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I get notes from my editor, I won't the first round is maybe like 6 to 8 weeks that I would have to work on it
Mm-hmm.
on average, depending on how big the revision is. And then usually a second round of revisions that's a little shorter, maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then the book goes to copy edits. So all in all, it's probably, you know, actively working on the book less than 6 months, I think. Like if you
Wow.
remove the
Wow.
time where you're like waiting for notes. Yeah, I know it's sort of weird to think about, and
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel bittersweet like saying goodbye to a book because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like, oh, I like I kind of wish I could spend more time with them.
Yeah.
I'm just so
Uh,
impressed because I've been working on my book for like 10 years now. And I'm like, man, 6 months, that's incredible.
I mean, I have friends like that, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I would love to take longer.
Mm-hmm.
If I had like the right project, and definitely some of my books have taken longer because
Mm-hmm.
um the first draft was bad and the second draft was bad, and you know how it goes.
Well, as Miranda
But
says, write badly.
yes, yes. Like my next adult book was supposed to come out this September, and
Mm-hmm.
it's coming out next May, so it's pushed like 9 months.
Okay.
Um, which is fine. It's just it wasn't ready, and it would have been terrible. Uh, so it's really, yeah, it's like you would like sometimes I think like, okay, I've done this a few times. I know how to write a book, but each book is
Mhm.
a new challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes
Sure.
sense. Okay, Maddie, I'm done.
So the question I want to ask to kind of end this, I think would be nice, would be if you could give up and coming authors one piece of advice. If you want to have more than one piece, you can, but at least one piece of advice, what would you say to them?
I feel like it would be right badly. That's part of it.
Mhm. Sure.
I think there's so many pieces of advice that are just said over and over to the point where they become cliche, like the
Mhm.
keep your eyes on your own paper, um, and uh, I mean, well, of course, like every piece of writing advice
Mhm.
just left my mind, but I feel like that one comes up a lot. But the one that I always come back to is write the next thing, because
Mhm.
if this is something that you are really serious about pursuing as a career, first of all, you need a distraction while you're querying or on submission. And the best thing is just falling in love with another book so you don't feel like all your eggs are in one book basket.
Mhm.
um, and then, you know, if that project doesn't go anywhere, then you have something else that you're excited about. Like, I, you know, you're always going to be more excited. Well, usually you're going to be more excited about like the shiny new thing than potentially the
Mhm.
thing you've been working on for,
Mhm.
you know, years. Like even now, I am about to, well, later this summer, I'm going to start writing something that I sold last year. Um, so it'll have been like a year from when I sold it to when I actually start writing it.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and I've been like, you know, excited to finish my current project so I can move on to this one. But I just got another new idea for the book I want to write after that. And I'm like, I cannot do anything with this one until after I finish
Mhm.
this other one. Um, because it would just completely like, you know, wreck the rhythm of it. And
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, like the only ideas I'm getting are for that one.
of course.
I love that. I also have the struggle of like I only let myself work on one project at a time. So like I sent my first novel manuscript to beta readers and then finally let myself write the second one. And now I'm back editing the first one, but I have the idea for the third one and I'm like, I want to write it so badly, but I can't let myself because I'll get completely derailed and distracted. So I'm glad that you were also like that and like got to focus.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, it is the forever struggle of
Mhm.
of being a writer.
Yep, there's always something newer and shinier and prettier in the back of our mind.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
it's like it's so ridiculous because it's like you know that even that shiny thing is going to be difficult. Like, yes, it
Exactly.
seems really fun right now, but it's going to it's yeah, once you
Mhm.
get there, it's gonna give you trouble.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you, and I'm so glad I got to meet you at your event. And just thank you for volunteering your time to come talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Oh, of course. This was so much fun. No, I loved talking with you guys. Thank you.
This has been Three Writers Talking Craft.
With Rachel Lynn Solomon, her new book, Past, Present, Future, is out now, and we are so excited about it. I'm Abigail,
And I'm Maddie, and this has been
two writers.
Many Wrongs.